And welcome into the Monday edition of Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. Hope everybody had a fantastic weekend, a very eventful weekend in the world of sports around here. We got a whole lot to get into today. Joe Rexrode has been a world traveler, maybe not a world traveler, but at least a southeast region of the country traveler this weekend. He's been all over the place in Charlotte, North Carolina, in Nashville, Tennessee, all lands in between, and has been putting in work at theathletic.com. Joe Rexrode, good morning. How are you?
Hey there. Doing all right. I went through an entire box of Kleenex on the drive home yesterday from Charlotte, but I will say I am much better today.
Good.
I know that this is I guess this is a free ad. So we had one Aleve D left in the house, which we try to keep around, but you can't buy too much of it because apparently people make street drugs with it. Like you have to sign a thing to get the Aleve D. It's like Aleve -D. Okay.
Okay.
Like, have you ever taken this?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean it's I don't know what it is that it has in it. I think someone's explained it to me before, but that's why it's apparently it's got some serious stuff in it. But it has helped a tremendous amount. So thank you, Aleve D. Aleve D. If you're a snot geyser one day, you may be a lot better off the next day with Aleve D.
Well, I'm glad you're doing better. I was a little bit worried about you today when I got your text message last night of what this could be.
Yeah, the weekend was it got progressively. Basically, I think it was like Saturday. No, it was Friday. The night sleeping into Saturday was like horrific.
Yeah.
You got to have a cough drop every. You know how it goes.
Oh yeah, sounds like a lot of fun to be having while you're on the road in a hotel room. Sounds great.
Yes.
Nick Keyser, how we doing? Nick Keyser, fresh off Milwaukee, Wisconsin, getting in at 11 o'clock last night. What's going on?
Yeah, the snot geyser, he's here. Now I'm all the way back from Milwaukee. It was a fun trip. Can't complain whatsoever. There was a concert after the game on Saturday night. Didn't stick around for it, but I will say Nashville has a lot to compete with in terms of getting their fans to stick around after games. But I guess they already do that quite a bit. So it was fun.
One of the greatest concerts I've ever been to in my life was a Styx concert after the Milwaukee Admirals game a few years ago. It was awesome.
You hear that, Joe? The Styx.
It's great.
Yes, I know. That's fantastic. Please tell me they played Mr. Roboto.
Oh, yes, they did. The place went nuts. It was incredible.
What was the concert, Nick, that you didn't stay for?
It escapes my mind, but it wasn't up. It wasn't up and coming it was a up and coming country artist. Okay. I don't remember his name, but I did hear reviews afterwards the next day that it was one of the better shows they've had to kick off this new year. So there you go.
There you go. We got a lot to get to on the program today. A lot going on in the world of sports this weekend. Of course, the NCAA tournament. Tennessee surviving and advancing on Saturday as they beat Texas to advance to the Sweet 16. We'll get into a lot with the NCAA tournament coming up on the program today. Preds stay hot over the weekend, a 1-0 squeaker against the Detroit Red Wings, where basically for a period and a half of that game they couldn't complete a 30-foot pass, and then they end up winning the game on Saturday. So good for them. 17 games in a row with a point. And the Titans make a huge move as well, acquiring L'Jarius Sneed, we think, from the Kansas City Chiefs. Has not been made official yet, but reporting is that they've acquired L'Jarius Sneed. So a lot of things going down today. Joe, before we get into the Sneed stuff, your thoughts quickly on Tennessee, their win against Texas to survive and advance to the Sweet 16, which we're going to get into in a whole lot more in depth in the 7 o'clock hour.
Yeah, well, look, you don't take trips to the Sweet 16 for granted. Third one under Rick Barnes, 10th ever. And it's funny because after the game, I was writing, but I just went back to the hotel to write, so I was listening to like the post game on like whatever CBS or whatever, whichever I'd like the last game, and It was like very widely varying. It's like Seth Davis is like, that's really bothersome about Tennessee, like that. But and then Jay Wright's like, I think that's a great sign that you can win that game when you shoot like that. I mean, look, the bottom line is if they keep shooting like that, they're not going to win. They're not going to keep advancing.
Correct.
But the fact that they won with the misery of that shooting night is also something. I mean, like you'd rather that than the other way around, right? You'd rather that than like you can't stop anyone, but you had a ridiculous shooting night, so you advance. I mean, they do have something consistent to hang their hat on. So, although all in all, when you make 7 straight free throws last 48 seconds, that is some clutch shooting that wasn't just enough. So.
Yeah, some clutch free
Big
throws by Adu and by Connect as well. But I mean, there was a point in that game where it reminded me of, like, when like your kid starts playing basketball in an organized league for the first time, and they're like 5 years old, and they're just running down there and just chucking things up, and they hit the side of the backboard, and the final score of the game ends up being like 4-2. That's what it felt like for a lot of that game. Just watching it, it was brutal. But Tennessee survives.
It was.
And advances, and we'll get back into them coming up in the 7 o'clock hour. Joe, the Titans making a trade for L'Jarius Sneed, adding to their secondary group once again this offseason. So we've talked a lot about L'Jarius Sneed, what he did with Kansas City last year, what it would take for the Titans to get him, and it looks like the Titans have found their cornerback and are going to be able to pay him the money as well. Now, Schefter put this out there late Friday night, I believe, was Fowler and Schefter put it out there that the Titans were trading for L'Jarius Sneed. Chiefs are going to receive a 2025 third-round pick and a 2024 seventh-round pick swap this year, and a new contract coming for Sneed with the Tennessee Titans. Jim Wyatt from TennesseeTitans.com put out his piece with Rand Carthon yesterday, and did talk about Sneed in that piece, said the trade's not official yet, pending a physical, and if everything goes well, that could be official here in the next couple of days here. But, Joe, just your initial thoughts on the Titans acquiring L'Jarius Sneed and what that now means for this defense.
Well, first of all, I mean, I'm surprised because obviously we talked about how close they were, during the first couple of days of free agency to pulling it off. And then Indy was in there, and then it died down. And so it just seemed like, okay, well, it isn't going to happen. And it comes around and happens. I would be willing to bet with, it's just me speculating, but with a lower cost than they were going to pay the first time around. I would think so, because this is a heck of a deal in terms of compensation to me. Obviously the whole thing here is the money, but I mean, I think it's a without knowing, just like any acquisition, what's actually going to happen. I think it's a great move. I think it's a great move for the Titans. And all of a sudden you talk about, Owuzie, Sneed on the outside, McCreary on the inside. That is an excellent on paper corner group. I mean, that's a big time corner group on paper. So just, I've seen some reaction to the effect of kind of like, what, the Titans, what are they going for it now? Like it's a rebuild, like a go for it move to me is Clowney, or it's Julio, guys who are a little later. And it's like, is there still a great year or two left? A little bit of a gamble, but you're trying to load up. This is a young player who is going to be part of your team for the next few years. And again, as we've talked about a million times, NFL rebuilds, man. I mean, you can take a year, and the Texans took a couple years. They just bottomed out and had everything bad happen that could happen. But they are not long. This is not college football where it's like, give me my 5 years and, get my recruiting classes in here. No. So this is a good young player, a really good young player who's now locked up. I think it's a big time move for the Titans.
I think it's a great move. And like you said, the compensation to go get him, really in the grand scheme of things, not that much. A third-round pick next year and a swapping of seventh-round picks this year. Of course, there's the money to be paid, but 4 years, $76 million, 55 of which is guaranteed, right around $19 million a year in terms of the base salary, the average salary there. there were reports they were talking about, him looking for $22-23 million per year. He comes in under that, the guaranteed money at 55. I mean, look, if he plays like he did last year for Kansas City, that's a great deal for the Titans. And with the cap continuing to go up in this league, I just think this is a great job by Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan and everybody involved with the Titans to bring him in. And I agree. I think you look now, and we'll see how it plays out on the field. But on paper, Cheeto, L'Jarius Sneed, Roger McCreary, that might be the strongest 3 starting cornerbacks they've had in the history of their franchise. And I still have concerns, Joe, about pass rush and help next to Jeffrey Simmons, who, by the way, was tweeting on Friday night, really liking that move in the secondary. But it's not a perfect situation on the defensive side of the ball, but that secondary all of a sudden at corner looks pretty darn imposing if you're another team looking at the Titans right now with Owuzie coming in, L'Jarius Sneed, and Roger McCreary the way that he's played last year. Still, some concerns about the depth behind those guys, but right now it's starting cornerback. I think they're in a great spot, and L'Jarius Sneed, he's a heck of a player.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just such a different look. No, I mean, he is, for people, unfamiliar, probably as aggressive a corner. You talk about a guy who will press, whenever he can press. L'Jarius Sneed. I mean, just aggressive, physical, fast. I mean, he's really good. So yeah, I think it's absolutely the best corner group they've had going into a season, and it does. I mean, in theory, it should. Like, I would always pick. You ask me which I'd rather have, like great pass rush or great pass coverage. I'd always pick pass rush.
Agreed.
But still, I mean, with these guys, you can also, I think, you can be really. And Denard Wilson, of course, is known for being aggressive. And I think you can be really aggressive to manufacture pass rush too, and different kinds of pressures when you have corners like that. So they still have work to do, and I think they'll do some work, to try to bolster themselves up there. But that's I mean, again, it's this year, but it's beyond too that those 3 guys should be together, and to solidify it like that is pretty impressive. You think about corner before this offseason and corner now. I mean, talk about a dramatic difference.
Yep, no question about that. Titans make a big move. They go trade for L'Jarius Sneed from the Kansas City Chiefs. They get their number 1 cornerback. We'll take your thoughts on that. 615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. What do you make of that move for the Titans? And what do you make of the job that Rand Carthon has done this offseason, kind of restructuring, reorganizing this team in free agency? I didn't got to the draft yet, and the Titans look like a pretty different team. We'll take your thoughts on all that. Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, the game. Hey, Robbie Stanley here, and you may be looking at your bracket right now. The first weekend of the tournament has come and gone, and there's carnage left behind with your picks. That's okay. You can say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset, which we've seen, or a number 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number 1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. My pick's still alive. We've been talking to you about Purdue for the last couple of weeks here. They look really good to this point. Tennessee advancing to the Sweet 16, so Rick Barnes and company have handled business to this point. But you could take it any way you want to take it. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/Rob and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. You must be 21 or older and present in Tennessee. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Got a gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. The Titans make a huge move. L'Jarius Sneed coming in from the Kansas City Chiefs. Titans give up a third-round pick in 2025, swap seventh-rounders this year, and a 4-year deal for L'Jarius Sneed coming in. So a big move made. Titans have their number 1 cornerback. They added a number 2 cornerback in Cheeto this offseason as well, and Roger McCreary playing the slot. So been, I think, a pretty active offseason for the Titans to this point, and a restructuring of the defensive secondary that, on paper, looks like it may be the best corner group that they've had, certainly with starting corners in the history of their franchise. Taking your thoughts on the move, 615-737-1025, our phone number. And, Joe, the thoughts on what Ran Carthon has done this offseason to revamp, retool this team. They've been busy, whether it's Calvin Ridley, the biggest free agent wide receiver in the class this offseason. They go out and sign him. They bring in Cushenberry up the middle, who everybody believes is going to be a big upgrade at center. They've done a lot of things. Obviously, Tony Pollard coming in at the running back position. It's been a very busy offseason for Ran Carthon to this point. To me, Joe, like if I'm a Titans fan and I'm watching what's happened to this point, it's got to be, I think, a really exciting thing. And on paper, again, we'll always wait to see how it plays out and what things look like when they actually get on the field. But on paper, it feels like Ran Carthon's done a great job this offseason. It really does. Spending the money that they've spent, getting the L'Jarius Sneed trade in, the compensation that wasn't really that much to go get him, signing him to the new deal. I think if you're a Titans fan, you got to be really happy right now. Officer Watson from Clarksville on the text line says, I'm a Titan season ticket holder. Let me just say I believe this is the most exciting free agency we've ever had, loving every move that they're making. I think Ran Carthon making a splash this offseason. I've been impressed with what he's done.
Yeah, well, what he asked there is something I was going to ask too, is because I'm trying to think of off seasons. I mean, I think John Robinson's first off season was exciting in terms of trading the number 1 pick.
Sure. Right.
So you have like a haul of picks there, and like getting DeMarco Murray, that in a trade, I mean that was big. Ben Jones, of course, and then the draft was good, but as far as moves where you're spending money, out there, because DeMarco Murray, I think that was like a 4th round pick. It was a good move. I mean, also great trade. Although it was later, it was like in the summer, but to get Dennis Kelly for DGB, but as far as out there spending money, so again, going through the positions of the people on the move, and I know this isn't free agency, but it's a trade. So of the teams adding players, so that the number 1 center, the number 1 receiver, one of the best backs, and now you're talking about the corners. I mean, I guess so. Basically, you got Jalen Johnson, right? Who, remind me, John? Did he end up? He stayed.
He stayed. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was possible.
Right.
So of the corners making moves, you're talking number 1 and number 2,
maybe. Yeah.
I mean, someone correct me if I'm missing someone who moved teams at corner, either free agency or trade. But I think they might have gotten the top 2 corners of that.
It depends on how you view Kendall Fuller, but they're certainly in the conversation of the top 2 corners for sure.
Yeah. So, just from that perspective, I mean that's major, And again, like look, I've heard people say, well, Amy Adams Strunk actually went on there and talked about cap space, so. I assume they better spend. Well, they're spending. I mean, it doesn't look to me like there's any guardrails here on what Rand can do. So I'd say I would think Titans fans would be very excited about this.
I would think they would. And, I mentioned Carthon in a piece that Jim Wyatt put out there yesterday, was talking about the moves that they've made, said there's still cap space, still more moves that they can make out there, and they're turning their attention to the draft. One thing that was interesting, and Trevor pointed this out, in the TennesseeTitans.com article from Jim Wyatt. I mean, Carthon basically confirmed that they had interest in bringing back Azeez Al-Shaair and Danico Autry, and it just didn't work out. Like they those guys basically elected to go elsewhere. So it looks like the Titans wanted Alshire and Danico Autry back, and it wasn't able to happen. So, I mean, for me, it's good to know that they at least tried to bring Danico Autry back, because I was worried that maybe they didn't the other day, and that was a problem for me.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's important to know. And look, I mean, I think good on him for saying that. I think some GMs might not say that. Just in terms of like, basically, you took some L's, but I think it's important to make that clear. And obviously, now another thing he said is, it was like right after that, it was like one door closed, another one open. So maybe if they kept those guys, they wouldn't have everybody they have right now.
For sure.
Right. So, you have to, I mean, certainly, I think of those guys, Autry would be the preferred, guy to have another year or two here. Aziz Al-Shir, they'd be better off with him at linebacker right now if they had him. But Autry, I think, is the loss, so, but what if they'd kept those guys and that they had done all this stuff? Then the defense would be looking pretty, pretty not complete, but not too far in the draft from feeling pretty good about it.
I mean, you've got, like you said, the number one center available on the market, the number one wide receiver in free agency. Pollard is interesting. I mean, it kind of just depends on how you view a lot of those running backs, but certainly a good player that we've seen produce at a high level in this league. There's all sorts of differing opinions on the Kenneth Murray move at inside linebacker, but a Woozy coming in now L'Jarius Sneed coming in. Like, it's been a very active offseason. One thing I think we can put to rest is the Titans are cheap crowd that we heard from heading into free agency. Titans have not been cheap this offseason. They've been willing and able to spend the money. And I think Rand Carthon clearly has had a plan heading into the offseason, has executed that plan in free agency by kind of revamping this roster the way it has. And look, there's still the draft to come up and more moves to be made, but I'm really impressed with what I've seen from Rand Carthon to this point. Now, we'll see how it all plays out on the field, but that was a big question I had heading into this offseason was Rand Carthon, how willing were they going to be to make some big moves, to take some bold steps? We knew they had the cap space, but how were they going to use it? And I think if you're a Titans fan, again, this is as active as I can remember them being. I mean, they've had active off seasons before, but this aggressiveness in free agency, and some of that is just the players that are out there, right? I mean, running back was crazy. There's all sorts of movement at the running back position, but I don't recall the Titans being this active and this willing to spend in free agency before.
Yeah, well, and what are the huge free agent signings in the Tennessee Titans history? Like, what immediately comes to mind? I mean, we mentioned some earlier. I mean, I think that, well, Julio was a trade. But,
Julio was a trade, but
Clowney was a huge deal.
Yeah, Clowney.
Yeah. I mean, Clowney was a huge deal. Autry was a brilliant move. That was like that was a low cost, excellent move. But like going out there and getting the top guys at multiple positions, I don't think it's happening. I don't want to. Yeah, I don't think, so, and, look, some people will say, we'll see, but, the teams that win are the teams that, go out. By the way, if you want to talk about huge signings, I mean, Bud Dupree was a huge signing. Sure. It didn't work out. Logan Ryan, I mean, John Robinson went out and signed some guys here and there, but yeah, not like an offseason like this. Yes, you need to draft extremely well or you're not going to win. Like, you have to draft well. That has to happen. It has to have happened last year, and it needs to happen this year. But talk about, making a huge leap on your roster that was so needed in one free agent period. Pretty impressive.
What do you make of the job that Rand Carthon has done so far this offseason, adding to this Titans roster? We'll take your thoughts on that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. We are broadcasting live from our Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Game Nashville studios, keeping your home feeling comfortable all year round. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser. The Titans continue to make moves. L'Jarius Sneed being acquired by the Titans from the Kansas City Chiefs, joining the secondary room here in Nashville. It's been a very busy offseason for Rand Carthon and the Tennessee Titans. We're taking your thoughts on what I am now dubbing Joe Rexrode, hashtag Rand's plan this offseason. We're going that way. Rand's plan.
Okay.
What do we think?
Rand's plan. Yeah, I like it. Rand's plan. Hashtag Rand's plan.
Rand's plan, very busy one right now. I got a texter on the text line that says, is this the biggest gap in offseason history for the Titans in terms of we have no idea of how it's going to turn out? I mean, this could be a really, really good offense or a disaster. It all depends on Will Levis. This is from an unnamed texter on the text line. I mean, it's certainly it's a very intriguing team right now. Another texter points out, and this kind of feeds into this point, like I think Rand Carthon's done a really good job. The Titans still don't have a starting left tackle, right tackle, another safety, an inside linebacker, a defensive end, an edge, and zero depth at most positions. So there's still a lot of work left to be done to this roster. So that part of it kind of leaves you scratching your head a little bit in terms of like what exactly are they going to be. But in terms of the moves they have made, I think most of them I really like, and I think they have a chance to really help this team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comment just illustrates the challenge, right? That he faced this offseason. I mean, the roster has gotten to a bad point, obviously. So, and look, if you want to go through like that with every team in this league, I mean, every team in this league has some weak spots, and the Chiefs actually have a few, but they have Patrick Mahomes, right? So, like, I mean, if I'm a Chiefs fan, I'm not thrilled about L'Jarius Sneed being gone because last year they leaned on their defense heavily. Their defense kind of got them to the point where then Mahomes could do what Mahomes does in the playoffs. But still, they'll be fine, right? So you're not gonna be shored up and have great starters and have great depth at every position. And you have a draft to come with some of that to be addressed. But I would say right now, this roster and this team's on-paper competitiveness is going to exceed what I would have thought possible before the offseason began. And that, to me, speaks to doing some serious work with hashtag Rand's plan.
Hashtag Rand's plan. I'd be interested to hear Stilly's take later today on why the Chiefs got rid of L'Jarius Sneed at the Caps fake. But, I mean, we'll see what happens.
Oh, believe me, there's always another reason. It's always
He's not that
else.
good. They didn't want him. Want to pay him that money. Hey,
oh, God.
I look forward to it. 615-737-1025. More of your text on our text line. Now, Mo on the text line says, I'm excited. Now Will Levis has weapons around him, and we can see what he can do. Now it's all on Will Levis. A lot of pressure on Will Levis on the text line with the moves that hashtag Rand's plan has made this offseason.
My goodness. It's all on Will. Well, I don't know if it's all on Will, but I will say that, yeah, again, I'll go back to what I said first segment, which is I've seen some, and even some people I work with, Ted Gwynn, friend of the show, tweeted this, and it's like, well, the idea of what are they doing? Like they're going for it now? Again, if you're getting young players on multi-year deals that are really good players that you can build around, that's smart. That's what you want to do. But as far as another idea has sort of been like, well, if you don't know what you have in Will Levis, then why are you doing this? And my answer to that would be, how do you find out? Don't you want to find out with a good football team around the quarterback? I mean, don't you want to give the quarterback a chance to show he's good if he's good?
Well,
I
also,
think that's the idea.
Yes, 100%. And also, like you're not paying big money for a quarterback right now. So this is what you do. You spend money elsewhere. And look, by the time you're ready to make a decision on Will Levis, number one, to your point, these moves help you make that decision because you're surrounding him with better players and you get to see maybe more of really what he is. But number two, like a lot of these deals we're talking about, Joe, by the time Will Levis gets paid, they won't be here. Like the roster, I mean, they'll be gone. You can move on from them at that point. And that's also, with the cap still going up at that point too. So I saw a lot of that over the weekend too. Of Titans sure making a lot of moves with Will Levis and the uncertainty at quarterback. And it's like, well, yeah, that's what you do when you're not paying your quarterback hardly any money. You go make moves elsewhere to help him.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants Mahomes or Burrow, but even those guys, like there have been other players and other people in those organizations that have had a hand in like them winning. Like you have to have a good team. There are different ways to do it. The San Francisco 49ers, maybe you think Brock Purdy is just an all-time great quarterback. I think he's good. The Detroit Lions, I think Jared Goff's good. But why were those teams playing for a spot in the Super Bowl? Why were the Niners a few inches away from winning the Super Bowl? It's not because they had these overwhelming quarterbacks. And in the Niners case, it's because of the exact same thing you're talking about, which is not paying a quarterback anything, and so you can have this ridiculous roster they have. So this is what you want to do. And and the thing is, if he is the guy, then you don't have to wait long before you're a competitive football team again. I mean, this team could win this year.
Exactly. Well, I mean, and look, there's still the draft to come, but there's no question, as we've laid out, the Titans are going to get through the end of this offseason, and they're going to get through the end of the draft. And by the time training camp comes around, you're going to look at the roster, and you're going to say, man, they've really upgraded at a lot of spots. They got a chance maybe to be decent heading into this year. There's still some holes, right? Like there's no way still that they're going to be able to fill every hole that they have in the draft coming up here. Now, having said that, I presume at some point they're taking a left tackle here. We'll see what they do at edge rusher, what they do, in the interior with the defensive line. I assume that left tackle is kind of a non-negotiable thing that they're going to take here coming up in the draft. So if, Joe, in one off season, you're able to find a number one corner, maybe a number two corner, a franchise left tackle, a number one wide receiver, that's a pretty darn good offseason right there, just based on those skill positions alone, how important they are to the success of your team. Even though you're going to have holes on the roster heading into camp, if you accomplish that this offseason and the left tackle pick turns out to be a great pick, that's a transformative offseason for Rand Carthon this year, if that's the way this plays out.
No doubt, and I'll add number one center.
Yes,
because remember, go back to that John Robinson first offseason. I know this isn't Rand's first, but it feels like it, right? That Ben Jones addition, which wasn't widely celebrated, but that ended up being a big deal, along with getting your right tackle and all the other things they did, Derrick Henry, et cetera, Kevin Byard, so that I'm with you. I mean, if that all works out that way, it's hard to do more than that in one off season.
Yeah, I mean, we knew the needs were so great that we talked about it. You're not going to be able to fix it all in one off season, but this would be a heck of a start if this all works out the way it looks like it will on paper, which again is a dangerous game to play. I mean, there's probably, if we're going by the odds, one or two of these that probably won't work out and probably are going to look back to be a bad signing just based on the odds of the way things go. But I think you have to like the aggressiveness and the willingness to go take those risks and to spend that money if you're a Titans fan to this point. More on the Titans coming up next. 615-737-1025, our phone number. 615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Score big this spring with Lee Company and the Nashville Predators in the 10K Power Play giveaway. Enter for a chance to win a Kohler home generator or $10,000 towards Lee Company Home Services. That's right, a Kohler home generator or $10,000 towards Lee Company Home Services. All you got to do, go online to leecompany.com/giveaway in order to enter. That's leecompany.com/giveaway in the 10K Power Play giveaway. Contest entries are accepted until Saturday, April the 20th. Lee Company, all you need. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Tune in to 102.5, 106.3 The Game this week for NCAA tournament coverage, brought to you by Toyota. Ready, set, go. Get your Toyota today at Toyota.com. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Titans continuing to make moves. L'Jarius Sneed coming in from the Kansas City Chiefs. Titans give up a third-round pick in 2025, a seventh-round pick swap this year in 2024, and signed L'Jarius Sneed to a 4-year contract. That is the reported length. $55 million guaranteed, and we'll see when that's made official here in the next couple of days, pending a physical. Taking your thoughts, 615-737-1025. David in Arkansas on the text line. Do you think Rand had some restrictions last year, being his first year, because these moves he's making this year are big-time moves? I just feel like this is a totally different GM than last year. Maybe it was someone else that was holding him back and is no longer here. What do you think of that, Rexrode?
Yeah, there's someone else mentioned, like would this have happened this year if Vrabel were still here? Look, I understand the sentiment. I understand going there, but let's remember that every offseason, like last offseason, was a totally different situation. Bottom line is, whether it was, and I guess you would probably say it was more Vrabel than the new guy. And I think there's no doubt, okay, that that Rand deferred on some things. It's not like he didn't. Some of these moves he made, they were his moves. Again, as we've talked about, some of the guys they brought in were guys he had experience with. But yeah, they were making one more run. That was a decision last year. They were going to make another run with Tannehill and Henry and try to be as good as they could with that group. It's like, basically the decision was made. Okay, lost 7 in a row at the end of last year, but Simmons wasn't really Simmons, and all the injuries, and this rookie Traylon Burks looks like he's got the talent to come in, and blah blah blah. All the things we talked about last offseason. Half of camp we talked about how great Traylon Burks looked, right? But that's just an example. Draft the guard. It's just, and also the cap situation is different. They had some contracts on the books a year ago. It's a very different situation. They did not have they didn't have the most cap space in the league a year ago. They did going into this offseason. So, and then and you've switched quarterbacks, and it's like the roster needs a total rebuild. Now, I think you could go back and say, did they make a mistake in, going for it one more year? Should they not have done that? But the thing is, that's the thing. That's where it was like this half-measure offseason. They drafted Levis still. Yeah. So it's like, if you're going to go for it, then use that draft capital to get players who are going to help Tannehill and Henry, right? So that's where it was like this in-between offseason. I will say, though, I'm sure that, like, Rand Carthon now, like, they've made it clear he had his final say. They made it clear he's the GM, and Chad Brinker is, I'm forgetting his title, but he's president, basically, right?
Yep.
And here's the new structure, new coach. So it does feel like a first offseason, but it's just the situation is so different. I hesitate to compare.
I do too. I understand going there too. Now, keep it in mind, you're paying Kevin Byard a lot of money last year. He's not on your team anymore. You're paying Ryan Tannehill a lot of money last year. He's not on your team anymore. You're paying Derrick Henry a lot of money last year. He's not on your team anymore. So when you free up cap space that way, we knew this heading into the offseason. They had a lot of money to spend. So it is just a different situation that way. And I've said it before, beyond just the obvious of the money with the quarterback, I do think there's a little bit more of it's a different kind of urgency in terms of like there's the urgency of going for it and trying to build your roster when you've got the established veteran quarterback. But I do think there is a different urgency of like when you're not paying that money for the quarterback and you've invested significant draft capital in the quarterback like the Titans have in Will Levis, helping find out what his answer is, whether he's a good quarterback, whether he's a quarterback you could build around, all those things. That's on the short list of job number one. If you're Rand Carthon right now, is figuring out what he is and whether or not he's the guy moving forward. And in order to do that, you had to surround him with better weapons. Now, again, there's still work left to be done. We just assume that they're going to get a left tackle here coming up in the draft, probably at number 7 overall. And they've got to do that, and they've got to make sure it's the right one. Like, they got to pick the right one at left tackle. And then that's where this offseason starts to become transformative is the word I'm going to use. If you can find the if you can find the left tackle that you can build around for the next 8 years here, that's when the work that he's done this offseason kind of goes to that next level. When you find the transformative left tackle along with all these other positions that you've been willing to spend the money on. It still comes down to finding that guy in the draft, whether that's Joe Alt or someone else.
Transformative or ransformative, Robbie? How about another hashtag? Hashtag ransformative. Someone asking who. Yeah. Someone asking who's responsible for Andre Dillard. No one is. No one is. I have not heard anything to the effect of like one. I was like on the table and somebody else. Oh no. Yeah, it was a collaboration, a mistake of the idea of this guy has talent and some fantastic traits, and it just got passed over, and he's worth a flyer. So, Dustin says, I know they say Rand is final decision, but I'd say Callahan is saying who he wants, and Rand's just approving it. Something does not sit right about Rand with me. Okay. As far as the Callahan thing, yeah, I would hope so. I would certainly hope that it is a collaboration. I mean, look, any successful team, like John Lynch gets a lot of credit, San Francisco, and whatever. Kyle Shanahan apparently has it in his contract, his final say. But go across the league, whether it's final say here or there. If those two people aren't actually collaborating, as sick as we are of that word, how could you possibly have success?
Well, I think there's evidence that that's taking place. I mean, they went out and they signed Cheeto, right? Like I would doubt very seriously the Titans are making that move without Rand Carthon having a long conversation with Brian Callahan about it. And even on the Ridley front, right? Like Nick Holtz, the offensive coordinator, is right there, who was with Calvin Ridley last year. I would imagine there was a pretty long conversation with him about, hey, what's this guy like to be around? Is he going to bring the right stuff to the equation that we wanted to bring in terms of his approach off the field and all those things? I would imagine that those were conversations that have taken place.
Like, I know this gets like fantasy football, and we're all watching it, and all the numbers, and you're looking at your roster, and it's like trading baseball cards or something. I mean, just put yourself, like, again, these are just people who work at a business, who work in an office, right? And whatever the directive is or the job is, like, if they're not talking and think about the dynamic of what a coach does. Rand has said this, said about Vrabel, said about Callahan too. Like, I mean, ultimately, like, I'm going to him. That's why they had these coaches go through these film sessions or what they're looking for in their traits to help the scouts. I mean, it's all to serve the coaches. They're the ones who are putting the product on the field every Sunday.
Exactly. 615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll continue to take your thoughts on the Titans throughout the show, the offseason that they've had to this point, the job that Rand Carthon has done, and the L'Jarius Sneed trade that was made over the weekend between the Titans and the Kansas City Chiefs. Corey Curtis will join us at 8 o'clock. We'll get his thoughts on all that stuff as well. The owners' meetings going on down in Orlando, some nice pictures coming out from that. Jim Harbaugh is on my screen right now, live from the meetings down there. I'm sure he's got khakis on. So a lot of stuff going on in the National Football League right now. Coming up next, we'll switch gears, get into the NCAA tournament. Tennessee advances by the hair of their chinny chin chin on Saturday night against Texas. We'll get Joe's thoughts from that, who was live in Charlotte watching it all go down. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Hour number 2, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. We will have Predators tickets to give away later this hour, so make sure you are tuned in. Preds taking on the Golden Knights in a big game tomorrow at Bridgestone Arena. We'll have tickets to give away later this hour on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Joe Rexrode, you are fresh off the trip to Charlotte, North Carolina, where Tennessee played Texas on Saturday night. They win 62-58. They advance to the Sweet 16. So this time of year, it's all about surviving and advancing, as we know. But, man, at times, was that a rough game to watch on Saturday night between Tennessee and Texas. Tennessee ends up shooting 33.8% from the field. Texas shoots 36.4%. At one point, Joe, Tennessee was 1 of 21 from the three-point line. They ended up 3 of 25 in the game, which is a whopping 12%. But at one point, 1 of 21, and I was sitting there watching it saying, number one, are they ever going to make another three-point shot again in their entire lives? And number two, once it got to about 1 of 19, I think I tweeted, hey, guys, maybe stop shooting threes. Maybe try to get to the hole a little bit more. But to their credit, and I saw you tweet about this too, and it's hard to argue with it. I mean, they got wide open shots. They just did not hit them, and it was wild to see them go 1 for 21 from the three-point line, end up 3 for 25 from the three-point line, and still win the game.
No doubt. That's another thing to remember. I mean, Texas is a good defensive team too. And so Texas, I mean, even amid all that, they're getting at times like Connect got to the rim some. I mean, they had some really nice, pick and roll stuff. Sometimes Adu slipped the screen a couple times, got him to the rim. I mean, Ziegler was constantly getting into the teeth of the defense, making a good decision and getting open looks. I mean, if that's what a defense is willing to give up, and I mean, if I'm Texas at some point in that game, you're like, yeah, man, it's in their heads, just don't, protect the paint and don't let them, get to the rim and make them make an outside shot. They also had Connect in the lane and Adu in the lane down the stretch with little short, like probably 6 to 8 footers, and they just came up short on both of them.
Yep.
But it did get to the point where, I mean, you're just like, I mean, it's like the whole team is just like, and so many of those shots were close. Now, some weren't. They also had in there that, I think Gainey had an air ball. I think Vescovi's first one of the game, was hit the lower right side of the backboard. That was like right in front of me. I was like, geez. But also, by the way, in the last 5 minutes, Connect and James hit huge threes, because like you said, they were 1 for 21 at one point, end up 3 for 25. It's just it's wild because they've been not an amazing, but a good 3-point shooting team this year. And even in the last game, the same basketballs, same rims, everything. I understand it's St. Peter's, but I mean, it's just shooting the basketball, right? They had a really good day from 3, and it was like, okay, they're getting their shooters going. But the 2 of the last 3 games now, they've been just atrocious. I think was it 8 for 33, which, I mean, 8's a good number to make, but like against Mississippi State, with that's less than 25% if my math is correct.
It's not good.
So no, and so I mean, I think the big question with that moving forward is, look, we've talked. I mean, and Josiah James was great, by the way. It kind of gets lost in everything because Ziegler was an Iron Man. Ziegler on defense was so freaking good and really running the team. And like Meshack against Osmus was amazing. Like so many role players did. The big guys were good inside. But Josiah James, 9 points, 9 rebounds, hitting that 3. He was fantastic. But we've talked about those role players and can they hit shots. I think the big concern right now, if you look at where the numbers have gone, is that Connect and Ziegler are really kind of on a slump, both of them, from 3. Now, I say that, again, Connect was like 4 for 8 in the first game. So he did everything he wanted in that game. But over the last couple weeks, those two guys have gone down, and they need that to change.
Well, he made a couple. Connect made a couple of big plays in the second half, whether it was on putback dunks or certainly at the free throw line at the end of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say, like, Adu knocked down some big free throws at the end of the game in a game where offensively I just didn't think he played very well at all, and I thought there was a little bit of timidity there in the middle there that you saw early in the game, and he missed a couple bunnies early, and it looked like that affected him moving. He ended up 4 of 12. But he made some big free throws down the stretch. And then Connect, just being assertive, going to go get the ball when they knew that they had to foul, and stepping up and making those free throws in big moments. There were some clutch moments for Tennessee in that game, so it was good to see. And, I guess it does depend on your perspective, because I've seen both of it, Joe. It's like, my goodness. It's 2 out of the last 3 games where they've just been atrocious from the field shooting the basketball, and that's concerning moving forward. And then there's the other perspective, like we threw out there earlier in the show, Joe, that Jay Wright put out there of, well, you played about as bad as you can play offensively, and you still won the game because of your defense. And you won the game because of some big moments down the stretch of you making plays that you had to make. So when you do shoot better, and the odds would tell you that you will moving forward, that should serve you well. So I guess it just depends on which way you filled up your coffee this morning, how you view it if you're a Tennessee fan.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, your team got to the Sweet 16 not playing its best, and there's complaining when your team just got to the Sweet 16. So there's a little bit of a pullback for a minute, look at that, and say, gee, could you ever imagine that happening in your life? Like, this year's Sweet 16, man, I don't know. Got to shoot better, right? But look, it like they will have to shoot better. They'll have to put it all together.
There's no question.
They're certainly going to have to put it all together if they end up seeing Purdue. Purdue right now looks absolutely done. Purdue and UConn look right now in this tournament like they're headed for just an absolute clash, and that'd be an amazing game. But Tennessee can beat Purdue. They're not going to beat Purdue with that kind of game. They're going to beat Purdue with that kind of defense and then their best version of offense. And by the way, Creighton is really good too, and they can, of course, lose this game, the 2-3 game here in Detroit on late Friday night. Yay!
I saw that. Gonna be a real late one Friday night for you. Yeah. Should be fun.
But hey, better than being a Thursday at least. At least it's a Friday, Sunday. So it's. But I mean, don't miss why they won, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, don't miss why they won. They won because they did a lot of things that you can take game to game. Their defense, I really was like, that was their defense. And again, I think the big difference here, and I do think Mississippi State, we talked about this, is this going to help them? I think Mississippi State directly helped them in this game. And some of this is talking to the guys, after Meshack was especially talking about this after the game, just like, guys met after that game. And it's just basically like, okay, the shots weren't falling, and Mississippi State gets credit for punching in the mouth, but it affected the defense. Like they crumbled in that game. And this was an example of the shots not falling, but they played their D. They attacked the other team with their defense, in particular, starting with Ziegler, but like the scouting reports, I mean, everything. They were fantastic. That's what you do, So if they can find it, they're just gonna have to have some way better shooting nights. And I don't know if that'll happen or not. Like, they need to come out and hit like 2 early on Friday, and just get it out of their system. Because you have seen this happen sometimes, right? When things get contagious, good or bad. But I do think that the way they executed and they defended, and again, then they were mentally tough at the foul line late. Those are all great things.
Well, I thought, Awaka had 10 points like really early on, and I was like, man, like Awaka is going in this game, and that was basically all he had offensively. I don't know if he even took a shot in the second half there, but that was really the only thing working offensively in the first half. I mean, it was 28-19 at halftime. It looked like the first team to 50 was going to win the game, but all that counts this time of year is the wins and the losses. And they advanced Tennessee to the Sweet 16, one of 2 SEC teams remaining in the NCAA tournament with Alabama winning yesterday as well. We'll take your thoughts on the Vols. 615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll also get into some other NCAA tournament action throughout the weekend coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Folks, is your bracket busted? Well, mine is. I picked Kentucky to go to the Final Four. But you can say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game of this tournament. Joe Rex here letting you know whether you're betting on a big upset like Yale over Auburn or a 1 seed, and all the 1 seeds and 2 seeds are still allowed in this tournament. Time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'll keep it local. I'll tell you right now, I like Tennessee in the matchup against Creighton. I like Tennessee in the matchup against Creighton. I like Dalton Connect to have a big number in particular in that game. Again, $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/Joe102. Bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. You got to be 21 or older and present in Tennessee. First online win money wager, only $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is now a trouble bonus bet. So it expires 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbet.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line 800-889-9789.
Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. Taking your thoughts, 615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. The Vols advanced to the Sweet 16. It's been an interesting tournament to this point, Joe. So in the Sweet 16, you have all 4 number 1 seeds, all 4 number 2 seeds. You have a 3 seed in Illinois, a 3 seed in Clayton. Duke's made it as a 4 seed. Gonzaga as a 5. NC State at 11, the lowest seed to get in the tournament. There's Clemson at 6. It's been an interesting tournament from the standpoint of it. There's a lot of chalk going on right now, and then there's the SEC who just keeps getting their doors blown off by everybody not named Tennessee and Alabama. Been a rough go of things for Greg Sankey, who continues to catch strays and people's post-game press conferences.
Yeah, everybody's ripping. I mean, I feel like we're a trendsetter on this program. You know, like we started going off on Sankey. Now the entire sports world is going off on Sankey. I think I saw there was an NFL free agent signing the other day, and he was like, unlike Greg Sankey, I'm going to have a good year for the Minnesota Vikings. Yeah, tough for the SEC. I mean, look. Like last night, Yale gets blown out by San Diego State. Like that Auburn loss to Yale is one of those things that, like, if they played 10 times, Auburn wins by 20 plus, I think, in the other 9 games. Like, it's just, but you get one of their best players, Chad Baker-Mazara, gets ejected. And I mean, I can't argue with the ejection for an egregious kind of like elbow to the head.
Yep.
And running up the floor. And that's just one of those incredible March Madness games. It's just like it honestly, it sucks because like I said before, Auburn UConn is all I wanted, and it would have been amazing, but they're bouncing in Kentucky. I mean, I shouldn't have been so cowardly. I said all week that Oakland had a chance to beat Kentucky, but then I put Kentucky in the Final Four in my bracket. I mean, it's like, just go with your gut there, man. But that's obviously a stunner, and we've talked already about Calipari and all that stuff. So those two are the real. You know, I mean, I think the SEC, I mean, A&M last night, which, by the way, I went to bed when they were up 10. And I'd say they acquitted themselves pretty well, you know, rolling Nebraska and then and pushing Houston to the absolute brink. And Alabama, that was a good for them to get to the Sweet 16. I mean, the Big 12 and the SEC were the best 2 leagues. And they were the best 2 leagues this year based on an entire season and also based on non-league performance. And those 2 leagues both have 2 teams. Good for the ACC to have 4. They're still not very good. I'm sorry. And the Big East people are really whining right now. I mean, Danny Hurley's out there, but because they got 3 teams in and they're all in the Sweet 16. But here's the thing: they had 3 great teams this year: Marquette, Creighton, and UConn. And then no one else in that league is very good. You could make a case for St. John's. You could make a case for Seton Hall, but you had 3 great teams. So good for you to advance, but you were always supposed to advance at this point, okay? So let's not act like this is some huge egregious thing. This happens every year. Like we all of a sudden take this to like redefine all the conferences, and we also take this to like go back and, you know, say what the committee got wrong. If anything, I think the committee, and I know James Madison did not acquit itself well yesterday. My goodness, that was nasty. But they ran Wisconsin off the floor, and I think that's an example. Like Indiana State, to me, is I come away from this weekend like, God, we should have been able to watch Indiana State in this tournament.
Well, Purdue and UConn, I think, clearly look like the 2 best teams. I mean, Purdue yesterday, they beat Utah State 106-67 and just wiped the floor with them. UConn 75-58 over Northwestern. They both just look, like you said earlier, they look like they're on a collision course right now. So can a Tennessee or a Houston or a Marquette, can one of these teams get in the way of kind of that run that we're seeing right now? UConn, San Diego State could be interesting coming up in the Sweet 16. I'll tell you one that I'm looking forward to. I'm really looking forward to Carolina, Alabama coming up. I think that's going to be awesome.
Yes, Carolina, Alabama is absolutely one of the best matchups in a game that should be totally up and down and a ton of fun. Yeah, I honestly have no. UConn's going to absolutely destroy San Diego State, and I understand it's a technically a rematch of, you know, the national championship game, but one of the best players from San Diego State in that game is playing for Arizona now. It's just they're not nearly the same team. It is a real that I love the upsets. I mean the fact that Yale. I mean the whole thing with Yale has been amazing. Like it's like their microbiology Twitter account. It's like Yale MB or whatever, and everybody's tweeting at it because they think it's Yale men's basketball. They're like, "Hi, we're the microbiology account. Try Yale men's basketball." I mean the whole story is amazing, but also sometimes they do rob you of amazing games.
Yeah.
So the UConn, they're gonna just trash them. But I will say another game that's really good and is big time. And these are two teams. Either of these teams, I do think can challenge UConn. Illinois, Iowa State.
Yep.
That is a massive 2-3 matchup in the East. That's going to be a lot of fun, and I do think either of those teams should beat UConn.
By the way, Oakland, they almost pulled it out again. They lost 79-73 in overtime to NC State, so NC State's magical run continues, but the run for Oakland comes to an end. So if you're a Kentucky fan out there, you don't even get to take solace on like Oakland going on some deep run like St. Peter's did now. They were just out the next round. Tough one for Kentucky fans.
Yeah, just like Auburn, It's like but Oakland – and NC State's on this crazy run. I mean, NC State's run is actually just like 1983 all over again. It's wild. With former Vol DJ Burns, who's about 70 pounds heavier than when he was at Tennessee, and yet he's just in there just owning the paint. But
some of that Carolina cooking.
Yeah, but Oakland was right there. Absolutely had a chance to win that game. So I'm glad that the nation got treated to Greg Campy. Probably my wildest night out ever in the Final Four was with Greg Campy and Detroit Media in 2013 in Atlanta. So that's the kind of guy Greg Campy is. Great at shuffleboard. Just an amazing guy who's been the coach there since 1983.
It's wild.
And for him to finally get a win and to beat Kentucky, I mean, he said the other day, that's going on his tombstone now. Here lies Greg Campy who beat Kentucky. So again, that's why the tournament's great. I wish they would have advanced. Duke, Houston, it could be great. Creighton, Tennessee, I think will be very good. I'm kind of like just the same thing with UConn, San Diego State. Gonzaga. It's not your older brother's Gonzaga. They're not. I don't think that they're going to hang with Purdue.
Joe, I thought yesterday that MTSU, the women's team, was going to take down LSU and Kim Mulkey. They're up at halftime, and then the wheels totally fell off in the second half. They only scored 20 points in the second half, and LSU got rolling. They end up losing in a blowout, 83-56. But it looked like for a little bit yesterday that the Blue Raiders were going to waltz down there to Baton Rouge and take down Kim Mulkey, who's going through some things right now, and the LSU Tigers.
Yeah, great first half, and they're up 7 in the second. And I'll say it. Look, little bit of home whistle happens. There
was no question about it.
There was some bad calls
going on.
Yeah, and look, LSU end up taking over, and they're a dominant team inside. And it was like at some point they're going to assert themselves inside, right? And they did, but boy, they got a tough whistle. And even like some of the calls, like when these officials get all it's like Leslie Nielsen and Naked Gun at home plate, it's like you're supposed to be calling this. What are you one of the fans with what are you doing here?
It was a tough look.
Yeah, that was a bad. And Rick Insell came out and said something about it too, and I don't blame him. As for Mulkey, I have more to say about her at some point this week, but Brian asks. I noticed Stanford played a game in their home court. Is that normal? Yeah, in the women's tournament, if you're a top 4 seed, you get to host the first weekend. So those are all home sites, and then they go to a neutral. Actually, they're doing something different this year. I think it's new this year where it's just 2 regional sites. So it's like instead of 4 places, with 4 teams, it's 2 places with 8 teams, which is kind of interesting. I think that's kind of cool. But great season for Middle Tennessee again.
Yep.
And too bad they couldn't have done that. Couldn't have finished the deal.
615-737-1025, our phone number. Go to theGameNashville.com/bracket challenge and fill out your 16-team bracket to compete to win great prizes, including tickets to see Kings of Leon coming up at Bridgestone Arena on September 26th. That's the 102.5 The Game Bracket Challenge, brought to you by ESPN Bet Sportsbook, Twin Peaks, and Volunteer Hose and Gasket. Coming up next, the Preds stay hot. They get another win against the Detroit Red Wings over the weekend, a 17-game point streak, and a huge matchup coming up tomorrow against the Vegas Golden Knights. Also, one part about this Predators team that I did not think was possible this time about a week ago that I'm starting to wonder about. We'll get into that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
And stopping the play and sending the puck over the crossbar was Alex Lyon. Here is Yossi. Inside, trying to get a shot away. Bouncing puck. Sent away by Forsberg. He scores! Philip Forsberg scores from Roman Yossi. It's 1-0.
Preds win on Saturday, 1-0 the final score. That is back-to-back shutouts for the Nashville Predators. Kevin Lankinen gets one Thursday against Florida. UC Saros with a shutout performance against the Detroit Red Wings on Saturday. And the Preds did not have their fastball on Saturday, but they extend the point streak to 17 games, 15-0-2 during that span. And that sets up a huge game tomorrow against the Vegas Golden Knights, and we want to send you to that game. We got some tickets to give away, a pair of tickets to see the Preds take on the Vegas Golden Knights tomorrow at Bridgestone Arena. Answer today's trivia question on our text line. Do not call. Answer the question on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Who did the Predators win their first ever playoff series against? What was the opponent? Who did they win their first ever playoff series against? 615-737-1025 is our phone number. The first person to correctly guess the answer, as judged by Nick Keyser, will win a pair of tickets to see the Preds take on the Vegas Golden Knights coming up tomorrow at Bridgestone Arena. Joe, a game on Saturday where
I know the answer.
Do you? Ooh, boy, Joe knows the answer. Joe, a game on Saturday where Preds did not have their fastball. Quite frankly, I didn't think they looked very good the first couple of periods there. And look, they've gone in the last couple of weeks to Winnipeg and Seattle, and then back here, and then down to Florida, and then back here. They're not really even practicing anymore right now with all the games that they played. So they're going through it right now in terms of the physical drain that they're on right now. But the third period, they ramped it up, and they look great, and they totally dominated Detroit in the third. They get the one goal by Forsberg to break through, and they hold on for dear life on the other side in the last couple of minutes, and they walk out of there with a 1-0 victory.
I mean, so obviously I was in Charlotte, but I don't know who of our staff put out the video, but that standing ovation video that we had, I'm like, I remember these.
The crowd was fired up Saturday.
So you tell me how close are these crowds now approaching? You know, like the best crowds that we've seen in there, which is a high bar.
We're getting there. I mean, it was Saturdays, even before the game. I mean, it felt a little different in there. And some of that, I mean, it's a Saturday afternoon. It's a Saturday afternoon when the weather starts to get a little bit warmer. I mean, those games are always fun. And, you know, people are out on Broadway and people are, you know, out. There's tons of people downtown hours before the game. So, you know, it was setting up to be a great environment. There are a lot of Wings fans in town. So it was a lot of, I mean, it was fun. It felt like a playoff game. And then the unfortunate part is, through the first two periods, like nothing was happening. I mean, you had the Forsberg cider fight, which Forsberg bit off a little bit more than he could chew there in that one.
Yeah, a little bit.
Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot going on out there, which kind of made people restless. But when that goal went in, that place went nuts, especially with just the way that things went down, and then the standing ovation and the way that they kind of held on there at the end. It was cool. It was really cool to see. And, you know, Joe, I'll be honest with you, we've been talking so much about kind of like the back pressure of St. Louis and Minnesota and Vegas, and the Preds are still in a great spot, especially when it comes to St. Louis and Minnesota, to hold them off. They got a huge game against Vegas on Tuesday. If you can win that one in regulation, you're 7-up on the Golden Knights for that second, in front of that second wild card spot. If they win and beat you in regulation, they're only 3 back. So it's a massive game coming up tomorrow at Bridgestone Arena. But don't look now. The Predators are 5 points back of Winnipeg for third in the division, and they've now drawn even in terms of games played. It was not a good weekend for the Jets. They lost a couple of games, and the Preds are 5 back with 11 to play against the Jets. It's not a 5-point lead with 11 games left is not insignificant. Like, that's still some ground you got to make up, but it's also not unattainable. Like, the Predators are closer to Winnipeg than they are St. Louis and Minnesota on the backside of things right now, which this time about a week and a half ago I did not think would be possible. But all of a sudden, maybe that third spot could be in view for the Predators if they play their cards right here.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, overall, what they've done here, you could if you went back to the beginning of it, I might say, you know, they might be in a better spot even, but everybody else has been winning at a pretty good rate. But 3 in a row now for the Jets. And of course, now the interesting thing there is the 1 and the 2 right now both have, you know, the Avs and Stars both sitting there at 97 points. Now, if you believe the Avs are going to pull away, then that's where this is big to me, right? I mean, if you believe the Avs are going to pull away, and right now they do have a game in hand on the Stars, so they're both sitting there at 97 points, then yeah, if you can get the 3, then you're set up with the Stars. And I mean, I personally think that would be a much better situation for the Preds than being paired up with the Avs. But you also still don't know how that's going to go for sure. You
don't. And right now, I mean, if the playoffs started today, which is one of my favorite things, their matchup would be against Colorado. So it kind of goes back and forth every day. Colorado, Dallas technically tied. But Winnipeg falling off a little bit. I mean, they're only 4 points back of those two, so they could go on a run here. But, I mean, you look at the schedule for the Predators. They got the massive game tomorrow against Vegas and seeing if they could keep that thing going. They have Arizona Thursday, at Colorado on Saturday, and then in April you have Winnipeg at home as well. So you still have more games against Colorado and Winnipeg. You know, St. Louis you could throw into that mix, but in terms of teams that you're directly competing with. But that game against Winnipeg on April the 8th could end up being a massive game in terms of like third in the division, and I did not think that was going to happen.
I mean, between the Avs, Stars, and Preds, you're talking about 18 straight wins combined.
Yeah.
You know? But the Avs have 9 of those. I just have to think I think the Avs are going to, I think the Avs are going to end up being the 1 seed in the West.
I agree. They're going to win the division. I mean, they were down 4-0 yesterday. They came back, won 5-4 in overtime against Pittsburgh, which tough one for the Penguins yesterday. But they look like a buzzsaw right now. The Preds, look, I mean, I think they deserve a lot of credit for Saturday because it was pretty clear that they were off the first couple of periods. And UC Saros played great. He made a couple of huge saves in the first 2 periods. I still think for the most part they defended pretty well. And then in the third, I mean, it felt like they spent until the last 2 or 3 minutes where Detroit was in desperation mode. It felt like in the third period the Preds had the puck the whole time. And that it kind of looked like what it's looked like throughout this whole stretch here. And Philip Forsberg was able to get one to go. And they're just making plays that are winning plays at the right time right now, and they continue to do it. And again, I mean, they're supposed to practice today. They had the day off yesterday. They got a team picture coming up today, and they're going to theoretically practice after that. My guess is the practice is going to have like about 7 people on the ice. They are exhausted right now. So part of this is also managing the schedule moving forward here and making sure that you're fresh and ready to go for the games. And we'll see how much energy they've got. But that was an impressive performance in the third period to gut that one out. And they're not always going to look pretty. For the most part, they have looked pretty on this stretch, but that was an example of kind of grinding out an ugly one on Saturday.
Yeah, and I mean, look, the Red Wings they're desperate. The Red Wings right now are fighting, they're right there, I think, like a point out of a playoff spot, and they, not long ago, were in good shape, and they, hit the skids. But, yeah, it's a pretty solid team, desperate team, and you're not always going to have your best, but like you said, if you can grit it out, you get great goaltending, your star forward scores a goal, you got that atmosphere, and then you got a little extra time here before this huge next game, the next huge game on the schedule.
Matt on the text line says, Robbie, I disagree. The teams played awesome on both sides, but the goalies were incredibly hot all the way through the game. I'm telling you, they did not play awesome first 2 periods, and they agreed with that after the game. Not very good for the first 2 periods. They couldn't complete passes and were passing to no one, and they defended well. That's good. I mean, if you're gonna have lapses, at least it wasn't on the defensive side of things. But offensively, they looked like they'd never played together for the first 2 periods of that game the other day. Which it's gonna happen from time to time.
Right. I mean, you're just not. I mean, you're not gonna. I mean, after most games, there's at least one period the coach didn't like,
Yes.
from his team. So, I mean, so that's just, every single kind of way you can win games. Obviously, we've talked about how their offense, expected goals, actual goals, all those things have been up during this stretch, and they've dominated possession, all these things. But now you can win a game like this, which I guess in a way maybe feels more like a playoff game. In the playoffs, the time and space is gonna evaporate on you, right? I don't know if that was necessarily this or just the fact that it's a 1-0 game, but bottom line is they're winning different ways, which is another mark of a good team.
Josh from Lebanon says, would love to hear your thoughts on Forsberg possibly getting to 50 goals this year. He's at 39 right now, 39 with 11 left to play, which means
that's a lofty standard.
He'd have to get to 11 in the next 11 games. I feel great about 40. I mean, he's going to get to 40. And I feel okay about 45. I think 50 that'd be a heck of a run for Forsberg over the last 11, 12 games here to close things out.
By the way, look, I say this knowing that last year he got the head injury in Philly and missed the rest of the season, but 2 out of 3 years now you're talking about, and how many years did we spend saying, is this guy ever going to be a 40-goal scorer?
Right.
And now it's 2 out of 3 years that he's been able to stay healthy, and he's going to get there. And it's not just a contract year now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was the thing. The 1 year he did it, that's a contract year. Well, now here he is doing it again, which credit to him. And I do think credit to what Andrew Burnett has brought as well.
I agree. And I asked him after the game the other night, like if like right now he feels like he's playing the best hockey he's ever played. And, most time when you ask these hockey players questions like that, they're like, I don't know. He said, yep, sure is. So he's aware of how well that he's playing right now. 615-737-1025, our phone number. Nick Keiser, do we have a winner on our tickets that we gave away?
Yes, John is our winner this morning, and I got a lot of weird answers.
Really?
Honestly. I even got a Coyotes answer. That's baffling.
Believe it
to
or
me.
not, they have never beaten the Coyotes. In the
Yeah,
playoffs.
that doesn't happen.
Yeah, they've lost to them twice in the playoffs. The correct answer, the Anaheim Ducks in 2011 was the team that the Predators beat for their first ever playoff series win. We got a lot of guesses for Detroit
Yes,
on the
we
text
did.
line too, which I knew we would, which happened the year after in 2012, and that did kind of feel like a seminal moment in the franchise. But 2011 Anaheim Ducks, the Predators dispatched them in 6 games, their first ever playoff series win. So congratulations to John.
Got to the Canucks.
They did.
Ducks to Canucks.
They did. The Ryan Kessler series. 615, one of several Ryan Kessler series. 615-737-1025, our phone number. Coming up next, it's time for the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode. You can check that out every morning here on the program. We'll do that next. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game.
Sometimes he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. And sometimes he's just, well, Joe.
Awkward moment, let's do it.
This is the Rex Rant, now on Robby and Rexrode.
It is time for the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode. You can check it out every morning here on the program. Joe Rexrode back from Charlotte, North Carolina, fresh off a trip to the NCAA tournament's opening weekend. Rexrode, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, I think you get deja vu. I think I've ranted about Bryce Drew. Have I not?
I'm sure at some point long ago.
Okay, so it hasn't been that recently. Okay, well then that's good. So, the national media, and again, like people sometimes accuse me of, caping for my friends. So I've got some friends who I just am absolutely just sick of hearing their crap right now. Okay. Like my former coworker, Seth Davis, Mike DeCourcy. I love Mike DeCourcy. Sporting News. I mean, there's a guy who, when I was a young journalist, he couldn't have been nicer, more helpful. I remember that stuff. He's really good. I appreciate him. John Rousing does a good job for CBS. Those are the three guys in particular who, when Grand Canyon University won their first round game. Gosh, who the heck did they beat, by the way?
I can't remember. Let me go look.
But when they won their first round game, we immediately have to take to Twitter. Now, actually, Mike DeCourcy did this last week. He said that the Bryce Drew firing at Vanderbilt was the worst he's seen.
St. Mary's, by the way.
Beat St. Mary's, yeah. And I got to say, Mike, Rob Lanier just got fired at SMU after 2 years. You can find a worse firing than Bryce Drew every single effing year in this sport. I mean, that is one of the most ridiculous statements I've ever heard, Mike DeCourcy. I love you. That's absolutely insane. And I've argued with Mike before about this when it happened. And I'm like, Mike, I know you like Bryce, and everybody loves Homer Drew and Scott Drew and the Drew family. They're great people. But if you don't know what happened and you just know that you like Bryce Drew and you think he's a good coach, then I think you should stand down a little bit. And it's just this revisionist history stuff about Bryce Drew. Bryce Drew had the first 2 20-loss seasons at Vanderbilt, and he went 0-18. And yes, he lost Darius Garland. He also had NBA player Sabian Lee. He also had NBA player Matt Ryan. He also had NBA player Aaron Nesmith. He also had Simi Shitu, who is like a G League guy who was a 5-star recruit. And he went 0-18. Do we seriously have to keep doing this? But I'm glad that, and again, I like Bryce. He's a good guy. And I think here's what Bryce Drew is. Bryce Drew is not a very good basketball coach. Bryce Drew would not succeed at the Power 5 level. Bryce Drew is a great recruiter. So, and that matters. I mean, that's part of being a coach is putting together a roster. I mean, if you watch any of Grand Canyon, Tyon Grant Foster, I'm like, that dude could start for any team in this tournament. He had 29 points last night in their loss to Alabama. But I'm glad that they got to that point because people saw a little bit of what the issue is with Bryce Drew. The issue is I don't know what the heck he does during a game. They ran 0 offense in that game. And I'm telling you, like, they essentially – so what happens is teams usually run a set, and then you try to get what you're trying to get in the set. And then, if the defense does a good job, takes it away, then basically what are you going to do? You're going to bring a high ball screen with your point guard or whoever has the ball, and you're going to play off that, right? Like, they sometimes brought the high ball screen just to start, and sometimes they just said, whoever has the ball, just go try to drive. And I know a lot of this game was in transition and everything. But, like, seriously, that was their approach, okay? To the point that here is what Charles Barkley said. And Charles Barkley, sometimes, on the college basketball stuff, it's like, dude, I mean, I prefer him in the NBA. But he knows basketball. He knows the game of basketball. Here's his quote. Quote, Grand Canyon, that was the dumbest game of basketball I think I've ever seen. I don't think they ran a play the entire second half. Some of the dumbest basketball I've ever seen, end quote. That's Bryce Drew. So, again, the point is really not to rip him. good for him for what he's done at Grand Canyon, and he did a great job at Valparaiso. He's an amazing recruiter. He's a super likable guy. Kids love him, and so, I mean, he's going to keep having success there, I think. The idea that he was like this was some egregious firing, that he was a misunderstood good coach. You don't know what happened here. It was bad. It was really bad. And Matthew Fisher Davis, who played for Bryce Drew, has been out here. He fights this all the time. And he has said, their first year when they did make the NCAA tournament, they tried to do what Bryce Drew wanted to do on offense. It didn't work. So they went back to Kevin Stallings' offense because that's what the guys knew. He had some really good players left over from Kevin Stallings, and they got to the tournament running Stallings stuff. And then the next 2 years, we saw what happened. One of the worst defensive teams in college basketball, and also an offense that made zero sense. I have no idea what they were doing. For the most part, when they almost beat Tennessee, they run all these horn sets, and it was good, and they almost won. So, look, Bryce Drew knows basketball. I just watched that team last night run nothing all night, and it's just enough about Bryce Drew.
You left out the best part of the Barkley quote where he referred to the University of Alabama as Alabama University like 3 separate times. It was good stuff. I don't know if he meant to do that and he's like taking shots at Alabama or if it was just a natural slip.
Oh, he absolutely did. Well, by the way, so I want to give Nick a chance because Nick apparently has agreements. You can just take a rant someday, Nick, if you want.
Someday. We don't really have enough time this morning. Maybe I could save it. So,
are you going to save it or are you going to
save it?
Let's save it.
Okay.
Let's save it.
Ooh, a Keezer rant tomorrow?
Yes.
Oh, boy. We'll have to come up with a name. We need submissions on the text line right now. What's the best name for a Nick Keezer rant? We've got the Rex rant. We've got the Rob rant. What about Nick Keezer? Let us know. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Looking forward to Nick Keezer's rant tomorrow here on the program. No pressure, Nick. We'll see how it goes.
Oh, I'm not worried about it.
Good. That's good.
This will be really easy.
Confidence is key. Coming up next, we'll be joined by Corey Curtis from News 2. We'll get his thoughts on the L'Jarius Sneed trade by the Titans and the job that Rand Carthon has done with this roster this offseason. All that and more coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Final hour, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. And as we do every Monday morning at 8 o'clock, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our friend Corey Curtis from News 2. Corey, good morning. How are you?
I am absolutely adequate.
Adequate. That's good.
Yeah.
Better than inadequate.
Yep.
It's not bad.
Yep. Well, that would describe much of my life and my teams, but okay.
Corey, it's been a very interesting offseason for the Tennessee Titans to this point.
Oh, my.
And another wrinkle added over the weekend. L'Jarius Sneed, now a Tennessee Titans. Titans giving up a third-round pick in 2025, swapping seventh-round picks this year in 2024, and now get their number one cornerback coming in on a 4-year deal. What do you make of that move and what that does for this Titans defense?
Well, I mean, it's a really aggressive move, and it's, you know, I hate saying I didn't expect this much this quickly, but it's really more than I expected, you know, in this offseason, you know, from this team, and maybe that was foolish of me with the amount of cap space they have, but I guess that's kind of what I've grown accustomed to. But I mean, listen, I mean, you know, when they got Cheeto, I thought, you know, okay, they're largely done over there, except for maybe adding a vet or a draft pick or whatever. So, I mean, they've really addressed an area that has been largely inadequate for a good period of time. And so the other thing it tells me is they want to win this year. And, you know, I didn't know how realistic that was going into this offseason. I guess I probably didn't think it was very realistic at all. You know, I'm not saying they're Super Bowl contenders, but I certainly think they can contend for a playoff spot if they can, you know, get their offensive line, you know, tweaked up a little bit. And maybe I should have considered more that Levis has got 3 years left on his rookie deal, and that this is that window where you've really got to strike because you've got an extra $40 million in cap space, you know, because your quarterback's on a rookie deal. And so I probably should have expected them to be more aggressive. I know that's a really long answer, but there's layers to it.
Well, that's the thing, Corey. Some of the reaction around the league about this has been almost like confusion, like these are go-for-it moves. But my, like I said this earlier, like to me, a go for it move for a team that's like feels it so close is like, okay, let's go get Clowney and hope he's got a big year in him. Let's trade for Julio and hope he's still Julio.
Pick for Julio. Yeah, I agree. This is a young guy.
If you can get core players that you want on your team for multiple years, I mean, in this league, how long is a rebuild supposed to last in the NFL anymore? A year?
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And you're right about Sneed. He's not adding a vet. He's 26 years old, and he's 4 years in. Yeah. And I mean, and he is a core player because he's an outstanding player, and he's the type of player, you know, you want. He's a tough dude. I also think there's a large disconnect between what the Titans think of Will Levis and what a lot of the league might think of Will Levis.
Yes.
You know, a lot of the league is like, well, are we really sure about him? Are the Titans really sure about these moves? All tell me the Titans are pretty sure about Will Levis.
Well, to that point, I mean, we were going through this earlier, Corey. You get the number one wide receiver that's available in free agency, the number one center that's available in free agency, the number one cornerback that's out there, and you can make an argument they got the number one and number two, or maybe the number one and number three with Cheeto involved with that as well. I mean, Ray Carthon is putting in some work so far this offseason. What do you make of his approach and the aggressiveness that we've seen from him?
Yeah, well, it's like I said. I mean, they want to win now. I mean, they're not trying. I mean, they're obviously rebuilding and retooling, you know, for what this coaching staff wants compared to the last one, which I'll say the attitude towards it is vastly different. I don't think we're going to see quite as many overachievers now, and they'll just go for ball players. And you know, you're seeing that you're going for guys with high production. You know, and we could say they went for guys with high production before, but they were guys who were pretty old. Ridley's still got plenty of time left, and Sneed's got plenty of time left, and so it's I hate to say it's trying to get to the Super Bowl when that new stadium opens up, but it kind of feels like it's trying to get to the Super Bowl when that new stadium opens up.
Yeah, and I'm with you on the Levis. I think I think you look around the league, some of these quarterback moves. A lot of just general NFL reporters are throwing the Titans in on some of these, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, what are the Titans? Justin Fields or whatever. It's like, no, what? No.
Well, if the Titans weren't in on Levis, then why wouldn't they have given a sixth for Justin Fields? I mean, come on.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. So, and I think that's the thing. It's like, look, no one knows what Will Levis is going to be for sure, but what you hear internally is not we hope he's good. It's we think he is, right? Like, and these moves. I mean, I don't see how you could possibly look at all of this and not have that verified.
Well, you remember when we had the Nick Holes press conference? Brian Callahan was always a little cagey about talking about Levis, but Holes let the cat out of the bag when he was like, "Oh yeah, when you take this job, it's because you're excited about what he's got to offer this team." I mean, he was very vocal about how talented they think Will Levis is, and saying that was part of the reason that the job was appealing to them. So I think there's a belief within the coaching staff from what they've seen from Will Levis that he's got the goods. And look, he's tough. He's fully committed to the job. We've seen that, and he can make the throws. Now, there's those intangibles within quarterbacks that separate the good ones from the truly great ones, and those things will be revealed. And they've got to find a way to not get him killed. And that's perhaps the biggest question still in front of this team. Can they put something together to not get the quarterback killed?
Corey Curtis is with us here on Robby and Rexrode. Corey, is this with Sneed now in? Sneed, Cheeto, Roger McCreary, I think pretty clearly the best starting trio at corner they've ever had in the history of the franchise, at least in the Tennessee portion of it.
Well, when they had Samari and they had Andre Dyson,
they did.
That was a pretty good duo. Who paired with Finnegan?
Was that Nick Harper? I'm trying to remember who that was.
Gosh, I'm so old. I can't remember. But yeah, I mean, Samari Dice was pretty good, and we'll see how these guys work together. But on paper, look. Financially, they're spending a ton of money on this group, because you put those two together and then you put Amani Hooker in there, and then you consider Roger McCreary's a second-round pick. I mean, that group you're invested in needs to be really, really good. We've said that about groups with this team before where they've been invested in and they haven't gotten enough from. Now, there's more proof on film for the guys they've got now because they didn't draft them. We're good with other teams. So, it should look pretty good, and it should afford some of those guys up front a half second more to get some sacks instead of having to get there in 2 seconds every time. So we'll see.
So we were talking about this offseason, Corey, compared to big splash offseasons of the past. The obvious one comes to mind is John Robinson's first one, trading the one pick, getting DeMarco Murray, Ben Jones, et cetera. Anything else that you can think of that compares to this kind of aggression?
Well, there was a year, and forgive me if I get these players wrong because, like I said, it's been over 20 years. But I think they brought in David Thornton, Chris Hope, Kevin Mawai, all in the same offseason, and there was a fourth in there who I'm forgetting. But that was a franchise altering free agent class that they brought in, and those guys were all good, and they all led to that 2018. And so, that was a big one. They've had other ones where they've kind of splashed and brought in some people. Like you talked about John's first year, when you bring in a Ben Jones and a DeMarco Murray, that changes things. But that's the one class that really, Kevin Mawai's a Hall of Famer. David Thornton was a really good football player for this team. Chris Hope had really good years for this football team. And those guys led this team to a number one seed in the AFC. So, that is the other one that I would put up there with it.
Hey, they brought in David Gibbons that year too. That worked out well.
Well, you look. Everybody talks about that. You can't help when guys get hurt.
I know.
All right? You can't. I mean, David Gibbons was really good with the Patriots. Is anybody going to disagree with that?
No. He was really good.
So, I mean, I remember when they signed, I was like, David Gibbons, holy cow. This team, they had, and we're still talking about Derek Mason because he's been, he and A.J. Brown are about it for this team. I mean, forgive me, Drew Bennett was a good football player, but he wasn't A.J. Brown. And, that type of guy they hadn't had a lot of, and David Gibbons had some really good years, and his knee exploded on him. It was, sad for him, sad for the Titans, because that was a big investment at the time.
Corey, last thing for you here. Preds win again, 1-0 against Detroit on Saturday. That's 17 in a row where they've had at least a point, and all of a sudden they're 5 points back of Winnipeg for third in the division. So maybe looking ahead instead of looking back right now.
Yeah, I still say matchup is more important than seeding. So, we'll see how that goes, and we'll see how much gas they've got in the tank when the playoffs get here. Their effort level is really incredible right now. I mean, you see even the game-winning goal against Detroit, that's just an effort goal. That's just staying after it, and they're getting a bunch of those right now. And I think I said this last night on Sports Extra. This 17-game streak is the most unexpected streak that I've ever covered in 30 years of doing sports.
Wow.
I mean, from where this team was and from what you thought of the guys that they were putting on the ice, a lot of what we would just kind of call randos, right? Just kind of guys. And to put together this 17-game skid, and, look, they haven't played 17 bad teams. All right, they're beating good teams as well. They're extremely confident, and they're just running over everything in their way. And it's spectacular to watch. It's fun to watch. I continue to say they could play great in the first round and still lose, and that goes for just about everybody in the NHL because it's tough, and they're going to have a tough matchup in round one. But this is incredible. I mean, it really, really, really is. Barry's got to be up for GM of the year. Coach Burnett's got to be up for Jack Adams. Roman's got to be up, for the Norris at this point. And I don't know where Juice is in any type of talk for the Vezina. But I mean, the way they're finishing is really, really, spectacular. And it's, you keep expecting them to have that let-up game, and it's not happening. Like when they went to Florida, I thought this is going to be a tough one.
Yeah.
They just got to 15, and this is and they go down there and they shut out the Panthers. I mean, are you kidding me? And so it's just it's continually spectacular to watch, and wow. I know that's my expert thing to say. Wow.
It's been a lot of fun, no question about that. Corey Curtis from News 2 joins us every Monday morning at 8 o'clock here on the program. Corey, appreciate you as always. Thanks for taking time to be with us.
We didn't have one conversation. I mean, I guess Justin Fields' name came up, but we didn't have one commentary here about the NFC North.
Not one.
Yeah.
Very quiet stuff right now. Very quiet division.
Yeah,
it's a rarity
to beat. We know that. So.
Yes, we do.
As usual.
Per usual. That's right. Thank you, Corey.
Yep, you got it. You guys have a good one.
You too. Corey Curtis from News 2, our guest on Robby and Rexrode. We'll react to what Corey had to say. Take your thoughts on the L'Jarius Sneed trade from the Titans from the Kansas City Chiefs. That's coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Hey, Robbie Stanley here, and you could say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game of the tourney. Already brackets busted all over the place. I know mine is fairly atrocious at the moment, but I've told you about Purdue. I've told you about Tennessee. Had great confidence in them making it through the first weekend, and they both have. So you can take it any way you want to take it, whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed. It's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets. If your first $5 bet wins, that's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. All you have to do, visit FanDuel.com/Rob and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. You must be 21 or older and present in Tennessee. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Got a gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. Appreciate Corey Curtis for being with us in the last segment. I got some tickets to give away. A pair of tickets to see Fall Out Boy at Bridgestone Arena coming up on Sunday, March 31st. Be caller 5, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Caller 5 will win a pair of tickets to see Fall Out Boy at Bridgestone Arena on Sunday, March the 31st. Rexrode, are you a big Fall Out Boy fan? Dramatic pause.
That was actually me muted. I wouldn't say I'm a big fan. I think I know a song or two that are all right, pretty good.
Okay. It's better than terrible.
It's better than what I say about some bands.
It is. It is. Your thoughts on the Titans, 615-737-1025. The L'Jarius Sneed trade. Titans give up a third-round pick in 2025, a pick swap in this year's draft in the 7th round. So the draft compensation, not a ton that they've given up. Now, obviously, there's value in a third-round pick, Joe, and you're giving up a third-round pick for a player. But, I mean, if L'Jarius Sneed is what he's been in Kansas City to this point, I have no problem with giving up the third-round pick and the money that the Titans have paid for him as well. 4-year deal for L'Jarius Sneed, about $55 million guaranteed at this point, and it looks like the Titans have found their number one corner. What do you make of the way this whole thing went down where, as we talked about on the show last week, the Titans at one point were in on L'Jarius Sneed. It felt like that ship had sailed, and they hung around and got the deal done over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, look, I kind of just moved on personally. It was very, very close to happening. The first couple of days of free agency, and then it's like, okay, well, for whatever reason, didn't happen. And I'd love to know what the conversation was of compensation at the time compared to how it turned out.
Yep.
It looks like the price went down, and I know some people have asked, like the physical and everything. I mean, this hasn't been made official yet, so he's had a knee that has bothered him. So I guess you always worry about stuff like that. Like, is there a more serious physical situation with something like that? If the Chiefs were this desperate to move on from him, if you're the Chiefs, I guess I would have rather just had him play on the tag, right? Just because this year you have a better chance of winning it all again,
right, with
him. And I understand, like, you'd rather get the third round pick back than just let him walk next year. But also, it could be the difference. Their defense was huge for them. So, obviously they didn't want to pay him the long-term deal. I do wonder about that. Like, why not? Obviously, but as you said earlier, the thing is that sometimes you do have to make tough decisions because there are financial considerations in this league, whether some people want to believe it or not.
And then with Sneed coming in, you've got Sneed, you've got a Woozy that you've added this offseason, and you've also got, obviously, Roger McCreary that was already in place. We've had people, Corey brought up, Cortland Finnegan, and we've determined that Nick Harper did play with Cortland Finnegan. He also played with Alteron Werner through a stretch as well. That one is not this. Cortland Finnegan played some good football for the Titans, but that's not what this is. Roll and Dyson is probably the closest one when you had Samari Roll and Andre Dyson. That to me is kind of like
that's pretty good.
It's pretty good. That's probably the closest one, but I do think between the three of them on paper, this is the strongest starting corner group they've had.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. It's like base defenses now are the three corner defenses, right? Whereas before, that's not how it would seem. So it's apples and oranges a little bit. But when you consider McCreary, who I happen to think is really good, and even last year through all the ups and downs, I thought was really good. Yeah, it's the trio is the best. But yeah, it's like, who was their nickelback back then?
God, I'm trying to even think.
It wasn't someone you consider in the base defense.
No.
That's just not how it was back then. But yeah, there is, like, again, on the Sneed knee. He did have swelling and missed some time in training camp, so there is that. There is the worry that he could have a lingering knee thing moving forward. So that's something to obviously keep in mind in the physical and all that stuff.
Yep, for sure. And hopefully everything goes well with that point. And Tennessee, Jim White put on TennesseeTitans.com yesterday that process is still kind of undergoing. And if everything goes well with the physical, could be announced here in the next couple of days. I think it kind of underscores the aggressiveness that we've seen from Rand Carthon this offseason. You go out, you trade for Sneed. You bring in Calvin Ridley, the number one option at wide receiver. Cushenberry up the middle at the center position. a woozy before that on the defensive side of the ball. It's been a lot of moves, a lot of big moves that the Titans have made this offseason. What do we make of the aggressiveness from Rand Carthon and the Tennessee Titans? And how is that going to translate to what we see on the field this year in Will Levis's second season? We'll get into that coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. We are live from our Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Game Nashville studios, keeping your home feeling comfortable all year round. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser. Titans continue to make big moves. L'Jarius Sneed being acquired by the Titans over the weekend. It's been a busy offseason for Rand Carthon and the Titans. What do we make of, Joe, what I'm officially dubbing hashtag Rand's plan that we've seen so far this offseason in free agency? Calvin Ridley, Lloyd Cushenberry, Tony Pollard, Cheeto coming in from Cincinnati. Now L'Jarius Sneed added to the mix as well. Been a lot of big moves made by the Titans, a lot of money spent by the Titans. What do you make of the way that Rand Carthon has approached free agency and the way that the Titans have handled this offseason?
Transformative, Robbie. Transformative. No, it's it's. Say you started this with Rand's plan, and it gets the bad puns percolating in the brain
it's
there.
Growing on
but okay, good. By the way, I think a lot of people contributed on. I think with Keyser, it's nicked off, right? I think nicked off is
nicked off.
I think
for
Zach and some other people. I think so, right? What do you think,
so.
Keyser? You all right with that? All the other ones suck.
Yeah, there's not very many good things you can say with my name. That's interesting. We can go for that for now.
Okay, stew on that for a little bit. Look, it's on paper. I mean, anybody, like if right now you're like, well, we don't know how these players are going to work out. Well, yeah, that's true every year. I'm sure at least one of these signings will end up being terrible because of an injury, probably, right? Just performance or whatever. I mean, it's just what we have right now as information. What we have right now is, we talked about it today, it's guys at the top of their positions who are moving teams in this offseason. Most free agents, but also then the trade was for Sneed. So it's pretty impressive to me. It is transformative. I mean, it's, if you figure out that offensive line and then, you can help that front seven too, then, you're not going to address everything, but this is a very different looking football team. And obviously, along with all these moves, we have a new coordinator and a new D coordinator in town. And so we're going to find out, what they've got in store. I mean, I'm very interested to see what Denard Wilson does with this defense, with these corners, with this quality at corner, someone who's already known to be aggressive. And, of course, obviously Brian Callahan is here as a quarterback guy and as an offensive guy. And that's a much better looking group, especially it's like we're projecting the left tackle.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're going to draft the left tackle. I know a lot of people coming with the maybe they should go whatever, Dallas Turner or somebody like that, and then do a second round tackle. Again, to me, if you think Joe Alt is a great tackle and is going to be a great left tackle, then you just take Joe Alt.
Yes.
But it could work out that way. And again, you can also get a Fisk or a Sweat or somebody like that in the second round.
You could, and I still think receiver is on the table and should be on the table. Whether that's probably more likely in the second round than it would be the first round. But, I mean, look, I had somebody ask me yesterday about, like, if Alt is gone and he's clearly your best option, if you're the Titans looking at it and you think there's a significant gap, would you go Dallas Turner off the edge at number 7? Would you, try to find your tackle in the second round at that point? I'm not saying that can't happen, but if Joe Alt is off the board, that probably means one of those receivers is there for you. I'd take a receiver at that point. Because, again, I know you have Ridley and Hopkins, but Hopkins has one more year left. At some point, you're going to need another receiver. I would not be opposed to, if Alt is gone, wide receiver still being in play at number 7. But regardless of if it's at number 7 or not, we are projecting left tackle to be a high pick for the Titans, and for, if things go well, to be a transformative pick where you've got your starting left tackle for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just where their evaluation is just, we don't know it, and that's going to be obviously critical here. If there's going to be some offensive tackles that go in the second round. If they have a lot of those guys roughly the same, then there you go. You can do that. And if for whatever reason someone really wants to get to 7 and they get back and like take Brock Bowers in the middle of the draft, okay.
Yeah.
There's that too. But they're not going to hit all these needs. But what Rand has done here is hit a lot of them, and he's improved. And the Titans, on paper, not knowing how it works out, they are better at receiver as an overall entity. They're better at center. I mean, that's the thing. I would say they're better at offensive line because of Cushenberry.
Correct.
They're way better at corner. I mean, last year it's like still kind of banged up and sort of frantically making mistakes, Fulton, and then the revolving door at corner versus what they have now. They are certainly not as good up front on defense.
Yep.
That's the big, other than left tackle, to me, the big concern. It's always going to be a line of scrimmage game. But man, it's a lot of work done for one off season. It shows you how much work they had to have done that there's still these holes, and we're still asking, is this a playoff team? Could this be a team? But I'm looking right now, the way things are trending, and if they have a good draft, then yeah, this team can next year go after 9-10 wins and try to get in the playoffs.
They can be there. It's still some holes to fill for sure. I mean, look, left tackle, I still think right tackle is a hole. So you got 2 pretty important spots on your offensive line. One thing that we did find out this weekend, Jim Wyatt of Tennessee Titans put it out there on TennesseeTitans.com. Rand Carthon saying that he did try to bring back Azeez Al-Shaair and Danico Autry. Did not work, obviously. Those two ended up with the Texans, but did try to bring back Azeez Al-Shaair and Danico Autry, and just didn't work out between those two parties. So I thought it was good to at least know that they tried to bring back Autry, because I was worried for a minute that they didn't. But apparently he just liked the opportunity with Houston better.
Yeah, I was going back and forth with someone earlier about that. Like, well, that's Rand's side of the story. I'm like, well, first of all, he's not going to go at the owners' meetings, talk to reporters, and tell them that they tried to sign them if he's lying.
Right.
I mean, those guys will hear that. Their agents will hear that. Now, is it possible that it was about an offer and the Texans, they lowballed? It's possible. Azeez Al-Shaair played for D'Amico Ryans. Look, man, if you're the Houston Texans and you see what C.J. Stroud just did, if you're a player in this league, players in this league want to win too. Yes, you want to get the best possible deal, good situation, you want to live someplace, you want all that stuff. But like, if you're a free agent in this league and you see what D'Amico Ryans as a head coach, and you played for him in San Fran, you probably love the guy,
yeah.
And now you see what Stroud's doing, I can see Azeez Al-Shaair saying, yep, I want to be a part of that.
Oh, yeah.
And that's understandable. The Autry one is a bigger loss. So is it just as simple as that with him too? Like, I'm sick of losing. That's 2 straight losing seasons in Nashville. Sick of it. And that team's winning, and they have the most exciting young quarterback in the game right now. I mean, sometimes those are things that make decisions too.
Well, and then, of course, I mean, Rand Carthon said that they wanted to bring it back. He didn't say what the offer was and the money and all those things, and how far apart was all that. So there's that we're just left to speculate on. But speaking of the money, like, one thing I think we can now put to rest that I never thought was a big thing anyway, and we kind of went through this in the offseason as to why we thought that way. But one thing I think we could put to rest is, if you thought that the Titans just were never going to spend money and we're never going to be players in free agency, that one's done this offseason. They're spending a whole lot of money out there. A lot of money coming in.
Yeah. Yes, that one is toast. And it is, again, go back to the canned Amy Adams Strunk interview with Mike Keith mentioning cap space. Titans fans should be excited. At the time, everybody was furious, right? The firing Vrabel, what the heck's going on? Didn't trade, all those things. It's amazing in the moment you think one thing and how things can change. But she said cap space. I mean, if an owner's going to say that, I mean, how could you possibly think that there's anything but a green light on it, for the
right?
But also, I know, and that's where people were taking as maybe preemptive spin from Rand, like in Indy, when he's like, you don't just want to. But that's true. You don't just spend for the sake of spending. You spend when you get good players, like they have been able to do. If they wouldn't have been able to pull off the trade or been able to win on Cushenberry and win on Awuzie, and pull off and win on Ridley, well, then they wouldn't have spent this money. They'd have a bunch, and we'd all be wondering if Amy's not letting them spend money.
Yeah, and, as we talked about, too, I mean, the plan, #Rain's plan, this offseason is also aided by the fact that you don't have Ryan Tannehill on a contract. You're not paying Kevin Byard the money you were paying him. You're not paying Derrick Henry the money you were paying him. And I know they replaced some of that with Pollard and all these different things, but they just had a ton of cap space available to them, and they're using it to their advantage. And we'll see how it works out. Like, they still got a lot of things to figure out here. And to your point, Joe, like, if they're long-term going to be successful, they have to start hitting on draft picks at a much higher rate that they've been hitting on draft picks recently, and because that's got to be the bedrock of your team. But certainly, I think if you're a Titans fan today, we've heard from them all morning long, very excited about what they've seen from free agency, and it's kind of a different offseason from that standpoint in terms of not only the money being spent, but just the quantity of free agents being brought in. It's a lot that they've done.
Exactly. Look, the successful teams in this league draft well, and that's what they did under John Robinson, and then they stopped doing it under John Robinson. And I know that the A.J. Brown trade that's the critical error, but it really is so much about just bad drafting later in his tenure as opposed to good drafting early in his tenure. Now, I think someone just asked about Jalen Duncan, by the way. I mean, Jalen Duncan, I'm interested to see what Bill Callahan does with him, but that's why he was drafted where he was, right? Like, it's like he has some traits, hasn't put it all together. We'll see. I mean, if he can be a good depth guy for this team, that's a good outcome for a 6th-round pick.
Correct.
But I think last year's draft has a chance to be pretty good. Well, shoot, it's Levis, right? I mean, they're building all this stuff around Levis, and if he's what they think he is, not what they hope he is, what they think he is, then it's going to be a great draft. But you have to stack those drafts. So after all these things, it's still like the next few years of the Titans hinge so much on what they do in those last few days of April.
Coming up next, final thoughts on the Titans, the L'Jarius Sneed trade, also Tennessee advancing to the Sweet 16 over the weekend in the NCAA tournament, and the Preds remain hot. They win again on Saturday, shutting out the Detroit Red Wings. We'll give our final thoughts, take yours as well on all that. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Final segment of the day, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5-106.3 The Game. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Joe, fresh off a trip to Charlotte, North Carolina, Tennessee holds on and advances to the Sweet 16 Saturday with a win against Texas. They'll take on Creighton coming up on Friday night in the Sweet 16. Joe, it was not pretty. The shooting was terrible for most of the game, really from both sides, but for Tennessee in particular from three. At one point, they were 1 of 21 for the three-point line. They finished 3 of 25, but they hold on 62-58 the final against Texas, and they now take on Creighton in the Sweet 16. Your thoughts on what you've seen from the Vols to this point, and maybe the concern level that Tennessee fans should have, given the fact that 2 of the last 3 times we've seen them play, the shooting has been absolutely abysmal.
Yeah, it is very much a eye of the beholder kind of thing with the Vols right now. I mean, I tend to be more on the side of you got to the Sweet 16, you were terrible shooting the basketball, you executed your offense and got shots, you were fantastic on defense, you were clutch late at the foul line, you're in the Sweet 16 for the 10th time in the history of the program and the 3rd time under Rick Barnes. By the way, 30% of the all-time total belongs to Rick Barnes.
Back-to-back years.
But you shot terribly. That's right. But you shot terribly. So what does it all mean? I mean, first of all, you should be happy if you're a Tennessee fan. And, yes, you should be worried that it will continue, because if it does, well, look, if they shoot like this, I don't think they'll beat Creighton. I like the matchup against Creighton. We'll get more into the matchup this week. I think it's actually a pretty darn good matchup. They do have the 7-footer, Kalkbrenner. So that's, the bigs have to show up. But I think that Tennessee is going to have a better time guarding what Creighton does, and they shoot the heck out of the 3. But the matchups are better for the Vols than what Creighton's going to have to try to do defending the Vols. But you still have to hit shots. You have to hit open shots. The 2 guys I'm concerned about are the 2 best shooters, which is Dalton Knecht and Zakai Ziegler. They are slumping along with the other guys we've been talking about. Gainey is in a terrible slump. Justin, that's his dad, Jordan Gainey. And then, Vescovy, too, like he has no confidence. Josiah James stepped up, hit a big 3 in this game, got 9 points. That was a nice development for them. But it comes down to those 2 guys, your point guard and your star wing. And they were still the best 2 players in this game. And everything they did in the game pushed the Vols to Detroit. But, man, you got to hit some shots. And I do think it got in their heads as a team. And it was at one point, I'm like, they are going to lose this game and just go down in just an absolute just storm of bricks. And it's just going to be – and the thing is, if it would have happened, Robby, what would people be saying? It'd be Rick, Barr, regular season Rick, blah, blah. Dude, like some things are – like, what is he? He's standing there like everybody else. They ran a good set. There's a wide open 3 in the corner. They ran a good set. There's a wide open 3 up top. He can't shoot for them.
I understand that, but that's what the discourse would be today if that's what happened.
Yes.
They could have shot 1 from 40 from 3, and it would still have been about Rick Barnes.
Well, if they took 40, then I think you look at Barnes and say, okay, you need to stream at your team and say, the next 5 minutes, let's just drive or whatever, right? I mean, 25 threes is a reasonable number in a game. That's, that's not insane. It's just that when you miss 22, it seems insane.
It does.
Right? But look, I mean, they like late in that game, they executed. They got some really good looks around the basket, and then in the foul line. That's where especially Adu. I mean, Knecht. He hasn't been great this year. Mike Wilson had a great story at Knoxville News Sentinel about how Rick Barnes stepped into a basket in the practice gym and said, "See, like you got to put some more arc in your free throw."
Yeah.
But you expect that guy's got to hit those. Good for him. That's a big time moment for a guy who could be a star of this whole tournament. But Adu hitting 3 in a row, man, that is huge. It's a 1-and-1, and they're up 1, and he hits both with 24 seconds left. I mean, that is clutch from a big man. So you have to also give them credit for, when it came down to it, handling the pressure of the moment and making the plays you absolutely had to make.
He's going to be big moving forward. We're talking about Adu in terms of, like you said, these matchups against the bigs coming up. But I also, I thought there were times in the game, and you may disagree with this, and let me know if you do. I thought there were times in the game Saturday where he was a little too timid out there and wasn't quite as aggressive as he needed to be. And they can't have that. Like, they've got to have him being assertive when he plays. And look, you're going to miss some shots, but I thought there was a little bit too much timidity in his game on Saturday, which has got to step up. And look, to his credit, he responded to that, had some big free throws that he hit, but they need him to be a little bit more aggressive than he was on Saturday.
In the first two or the first 5 minutes of the game, I tweeted this. He could have had 10 points right away, and he's getting stripped inside and not being strong with the ball. I thought it was going to be a bad night for him, but Texas doesn't have anybody height-wise who can deal with him. Creighton does, Kalkbrenner, and you're right. Now, I do think Awaka, who honestly, could have had 25 against Texas because he's so powerful that nobody had any chance against him. He could also be really big Friday, too, against Kalkbrenner. Those two guys, and this whole weekend, if it's Kalkbrenner and then you get to Zach Edey, you can get by Friday. I mean, I think you might see some JP Estrella out there, too.
Yep.
That's one thing the Vols have. They have bodies and fouls they can throw at 7-footers, too, if needed.
Preds win again Saturday. They're at 17 in a row now in the point streak, 15-0-2. Joe, a huge one tomorrow against Vegas in terms of where the wild card race is right now. If you win that game against Vegas, especially if you can do it in regulation, you're in great shape, not only to make the playoffs, but really probably to be at least in the first wild card spot. And if you don't, they're only 3 points back. So a massive game tomorrow at Bridgestone Arena.
Yeah, absolutely gigantic. And I'm sad that I'm leaving because otherwise I would be there. I really want to see what this building is like because I think seems like old times. I mean, this is, again, we're talking about stuff several years ago, and there's a lot of things that are starting to make you think of that.
Yep, a lot of things. We'll see if they can go for another game tomorrow at home, going to the point streak to 18 games if they can get at least a point tomorrow against the Vegas Golden Knights. Only 5 back of Winnipeg for third place in the division, so things are getting pretty interesting with the Nashville Predators with 11 games left in the regular season. That's going to do it for us today. Joe, get you a nap.
I think I will.
Good.
Thank you.
That's very good. Chasing Big Joe is coming up next. You're listening to 102.5, 106.3 The Game.